Alright, this is my first video after years and years of benefiting from all the different how-to videos on YouTube. I decided I would make one. I recently went to buy a compressor off of Craigslist, and when I was looking into things like pressure checking and hydrostatic checking, I was really finding that there was a lack of good videos to kind of go through the whole process. So I compiled all the information and I'm going to give it a shot myself, and I figured I would record it and put it out there for folks to potentially use as a how-to do it themselves. First couple of things, when buying a compressor off Craigslist, you'll hear a lot of people bring up safety concerns, and they're right, there are safety concerns, but if you go about it in the right way, you can get a pretty good deal and you can be safe at the same time. So when you go to look at the compressor, first off you should know what the make and model is, about what the year of the manufacture was. You should look at the visible condition, the stuff that you can see. Is it in good shape? Does it look like it's been banged around? One thing I would also advise is to go with a vertical instead of the horizontal or hot dog style compressors. The hot dog style compressors, the horizontal compressors, they don't drain very well. The drain valve is always kind of along the long axis, and it really means that there's always going to be some amount of liquid at the bottom, which over time will rust and hit the metal, and it will potentially create some weak points. They also tend to have the weld, the vertical weld, right along the bottom of the tank. So not only do you have the water and everything sitting there, but it's also sitting right on the weld, which would be the weakest point in the cylinder. When you go to look at the tank, when you go to look at the compressor, I would advise you bring, maybe a hose and a tool that will eat up some air. Make sure that whoever you're buying it from plugs it in, brings it up to operating pressure, check the gauges, make sure that the operating pressure is okay, check the regulator, make sure the regulator is moving the air pressure around the way that you would expect. If you don't bring tools, you can use the check valve to release some air, but what you want to do is make sure that you see the compressor cycle, right? So whether you do that by plugging in a tool, running some air out through the tool, or just pulling the check valve, watch the pressure come down, and then wait to see when the compressor starts back up. This one being 130 psi, I think it kicks back up at about 95 or 100 psi, it'll start pressurizing again. When you get done checking the pressure and checking the recovery, make sure they go underneath, or you go underneath, and release the bottom drain valve. And take a look, see what's coming out when the pressure is releasing. Are you getting muddy, rusty water? Are you getting clear water? Are you getting nothing at all, which would be the best thing, nothing but air? And just make sure that the pressure releases fully, and obviously you don't want to transport it when it's pressurized, so you definitely want to release all the pressure before you do that. When I went to buy this one, everything kind of checked out okay. The bottom valve, it had some issues, and I'll do a close-up here in a second of what all of these parts on the table here are. But it pressurized okay, it recovered okay, but we heard a leak, and it turned out that the regulator on it was leaking. So I was talking with the guy, and I was like, look, you know, I'm gonna need to replace all these things. He was asking $85 for it. He was really cool about it. He ended up letting it go for 60. So I got a 25 gallon, 130 PSI Craftsman air compressor for 60 bucks. So I took it, and I knew I was gonna have to do some work on it. When I got it home, I stopped by Harbor Freight on the way, and you know, Harbor Freight, good or bad, you just have to know what you're buying from there. As long as you know what you're getting, you can do well at Harbor Freight. Got a new regulator and a couple extra fittings so that I could put it on. I decided to go ahead and replace the main tank valve gauge as well. Got home, tore apart the whole top part, you know, everything from the pressure switch over, replaced it all with new stuff. And I used it the first weekend. This was maybe 2 weeks ago. And everything's great. I love the extra air capacity. I stepped up from a little 8 gallon, 125 PSI Harbor Freight guy that I got a couple years ago. But recently running a 20 amp line into my garage, I now have a dedicated spot for it in the corner of the garage. That's a 20 amp dedicated line, so I wanted to step up my compressor. At the end of the weekend, I went to go drain the tank. You know, everybody says drain your tank daily. If I know I'm going to be working on Saturday and Sunday, I might let it stay pressurized Saturday and Sunday, but I always drain it Sunday night. And if I use it throughout the week, I'll drain it as soon as I'm done using it. So I went to go drain the tank, and I started getting mud out of it. And by mud, I mean basically just rusty, sludgy water. So I went through the process of trying to clean the rust out, clean the sludge out. And to do that, let me grab the pump here. I got, again from Harbor Freight, this little hand pump. And it turns out that the out tube, this, if you turn the compressor on its end, or on its side, this will screw perfectly into the 1/4 inch NPT drain valve plug, or drain plug hole. So I turned it on its side. I filled it with about 2 gallons of simple green water 50-50 mix. Let it sit for a little while. Pressurized it up to about 40 PSI and blew it out. I did that twice, and then I did a 50-50 mix of vinegar. And I put it in there and let it sit overnight. And the vinegar is to kind of help, you know, loosen up all the rust and everything. Next day I blew that out, and then I did a couple of rinses. And while I'm doing all of this, you know, all I'm doing is taking out the drain valve, filling it up with water, putting the drain valve back in, standing it back up straight. Sometimes I'm pressurizing it to blow the water out a little bit more forcefully. As you're filling it up, you also are going to need to pull the check valve a couple of times, because as you're adding liquid to the tank, obviously you're adding pressure to the tank, so you don't want the hose to blow off. You pull the check valve and let the extra pressure that you've added in release as you're pumping the water in. So I got the water running pretty clear, and I decided why not go ahead with a hydrostatic test. I got an endoscope that plugs into your phone, and I shoved it up through the drain valve hole, and I tried to take a look around, and I saw some rust in there. But it was very hard with the endoscope to get it to work. It was, 20 bucks off Amazon or whatever. I plan on also repurposing it and using it as an actual bore scope. It's a 5.5 millimeter, so it'll fit down like a 30 caliber bore. But I couldn't really see it as well as I wanted to see it. So yesterday, I went ahead and took off all of the fittings on top to prepare it for a hydrostatic test. Now, before we get into the hydrostatic test itself, I kind of want to show you, I'll grab the camera and bring it up here, and I'll show you some of the different fittings and stuff that were on it, what I replaced and why, and how I built the fittings that I'm going to need to actually run the hydrostatic test. So let me grab the camera here. Okay. All right, so some of the things that were on the tank. This was, let me see if the camera's picking this up right. So this was the fitting that was on the tank, and you can see how it's like a twist fitting, and it doesn't really allow the tank to drain properly. Even when you open it up, you could tell that the guy was he was using vice grip pliers to do it. Even when you open it up, it doesn't really allow a full drain. And what had happened was the sludge had kind of gotten on top and had plugged up the release on it a little bit. So that's why it wasn't draining very well even when I went to go check it out. I would definitely suggest, if you have that style plug, replace it with a quarter turn ball valve. Okay, so that allows you, there you go. So when you go to drain, it's just a clear shot. So what had happened was, when I put the quarter turn ball valve on, the first time I went to go drain the tank for the weekend, there was some stuff that had kind of gunked up in here. So I took a paper clip, and with the tank open, I poked the paper clip up, and sure enough, it freed up all the crap, all the mud blew out. So if you have this style plug, get rid of it and replace it for $5 with one of these guys. Now, the other things that he had on the tank, this was the bad regulator. So there was a leak somewhere in the regulator body itself. So we got rid of this. You can tell, it's got some age on it. All of these fittings needed to be replaced anyway. The tank was just due for some maintenance. This was the check valve that he had on there. 150 PSI rated check valve, which is what the tank is actually rated for. I think the motor will only take it up to 130, but it's really rated for 150. So I replaced all of that. Well, let me pause here for a sec. Okay, so this is the pressure switch. It's off of the compressor right now, obviously. And this is where the gauge goes, the primary gauge. And then all of the fittings come off here to the side. Check valve screws into the body there. You have power out to the wall, power up to the compressor. And then this is one of the hard hose lines. So basically I replaced everything that screws into this. new valve or new gauge for the top. And then here is my new regulator, new fittings, and new female connector on it. I do like the universal connectors because they're, when you just plug in, it pops. You don't have to release it to plug in. So I always go with those guys. Okay, so for the hydrostatic test, what you're basically doing, here, let me back up and talk about the hydrostatic test here for a second. Okay, so a hydrostatic test, what you're doing is you're using water instead of air to pressurize the tank. So what you do is you get everything set up, you get all your fittings and everything in your plan for the hydrostatic test, and you fill the tank all the way up with water. You have to have all the fittings off the top to do this. And you have to go out and buy some pieces to figure out, how to get the liquid or whatever you're going to use into the tank. If your tank is rated at 150 psi, the rule is you have to go 1.5 times the rated pressure, and it has to be capable of holding 1.5 times its rated pressure for a minimum of 2 hours. So they use water to do that because if there is a problem, all that's going to happen is the water will leak or squirt out of wherever the fail point is in the tank. Water doesn't expand, air expands, gases expand. So if they were to do it with air, if there was a failure in the tank, it would explode, and that's what we're trying to avoid, right? So we're doing the hydrostatic test to make sure that this tank, which is 20 years old, manufactured in 1998, I think, is still good to go. I'm pretty sure it is. I've heard of and seen a lot worse tanks than what this one is, and they seem to still be doing fine. But like I said, for $20, $30 and fittings and equipment, it'll just make me sleep better at night, and I'll know that the tank will be good for as long as I need to use it. So let me bring you back up here and I'll show you some of the fittings. Okay, so actually let me show you the tank. So I took out let's see, do I have it here? The valve on the top of the tank that lets the air come in, right, this guy. And there's an air line that hooks up to that and then goes over to the pressure switch. The air coming off the engine goes in here, right? So this lets the air in to pressurize the tank, and then the air comes out here through the pressure switch. The pressure switch knows how much PSI is running, so it knows when to turn the engine or the motor on and off, and that's it. So this was here. This is a 1/2 inch NPT, National Pipe Thread. So it's not really a 1/2 inch, diameter. It's more like 0.8. I don't know. Look up on Google. They'll show you the National Pipe Thread numbers. I don't know if you can really tell, but the whole thing about the NPT is that it's actually kind of cone shaped along here. So it's narrower down here than it is up at the top. And that's to ensure a tight fit. It's used for pipe fittings for both liquid and gas. Then obviously you supplement it with some Teflon tape or whatever else you want to use to seal it up. Now, over here on this part of the tank, that is where the pressure switch mounts. Now, I didn't want to go ahead and take this out also. I just took the pressure switch off, and then I'm going to put my test hardware directly on that. For the plug where the pressure valve came out, up at Lowe's I was able to find a 1/2 inch NPT to 1/4 inch male to female. And then I had this bad drain valve hanging around. So I'm just going to use this to basically plug up where this was. So this fits right into there. I'm going to seal it up once I have water inside. And then over here, this is where I'm actually going to be adding the pressure. So I have this that I built, which will mount directly on. What this is, okay, all it is, you got a T-fitting, got a 1/4 inch to 8 inch adapter. I had to buy that one off eBay, I think. So it's 1/4 inch male, 1/8 inch female, and then I'm actually using the old pressure gauge that came with the tank, since it goes up to 200. Then I put a 1/4 turn ball valve on it so that once it's pressurized I can seal it off. Then I have a this is a 1/4 inch male to 1/8 inch all MPT female. I think this was maybe the one I got off of eBay. These are all about $5 a piece. And then this morning I got the last piece. So I'm going to be doing a grease gun style hydrostatic test. Went up to Advance Auto, local auto parts store here in Virginia, and I got this 1/8 inch NPT grease fitting. So the plan is fill the tank with water, put this on, prime it, and then hook the grease gun up to this. I'm going to pressurize it a little bit past 200. I know I should probably go to 225. The gauge doesn't go to 225. But since the working pressure is only 130 on this, I figure going a little bit past 200 for my purposes is okay. I got a new check valve on it for 150 PSI, so I'll be good with that. So that's it for now. I'll come back once I actually have everything ready for the hydrostatic test. My buddy Jason is coming over later and we're gonna see if we can get it going. There's snow on the ground here in Virginia today, so I don't know if today's a good day for it, but the second part of this video, I'll record it when we actually go to do the hydrostatic test, and we'll see how this goes. Thanks, bye.